to give a history of the future, looking back from 2035 to now, but we could also just open up this for questions. But my first question to the audience is there anyone here in the messaging space today making money?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And any of you interested in making a lot more money from your existing customers?
Yes.
Yes?
There we go. What a shock.
So that's what this talk is all about, really. So everyone else who missed out just missed out on an opportunity to logarithmically increase their revenue in the next 12 months. So when we look back from 2035 to today, as far as what happened, the biggest single change was the introduction and the adoption of vCons. So, but before we explain the dollar impact, Thomas, can you explain what a vCon is?
Sure thing. So a vCon is a new file format that is an open standard by the IETF. And if you're unfamiliar with the IETF, they're the nice folks who bring you all the internet protocol standards like SIP and RTP and HTTP and the like. And this file format is just like a Word file would contain a document and a spreadsheet, an Excel file would contain a spreadsheet. A vCon contains a conversation. vCon stands for virtual conversation, and it's meant so you can describe a conversation, save it to a disk, attach it to an email, but most importantly, analyze it using AI. And the big thing that the vCon does is it tracks all the privacy, all the data, all the provenance information that you need to use conversations in your AI chain and be compliant.
And that's where it gets really a lot of fun because, you know, back in 23, 24, you know, the best AI could ever do, if you as a user you had predictive AI. So when you're on Gmail writing an email, all of a sudden your email system is guessing the next word or next sentence. But what AI didn't have back then is spatial identity, particularly from a 3D perspective. That is to say that AI, from a conversation, when you speak to a loved one, there's a certain tonality, there's a certain dimension to it. If a father's speaking to a son, there's a certain dimension to that. And then when you're talking to a customer, different nuances. And let's just say that the advent of the vCon not only provides compliance, but provides a depth and a richness that never before was possible. And so when you look to the single thing that changed, well, it's true that Thomas, when he co-created the vCon and wrote the spec in 21, he had no idea that OpenAI was coming out with their stuff. And by pure serendipity and synchronicity, by the time that ChatGPT was born and Claude was born and other large language models were born, for breakfast they consumed Wikipedia, all the IETF specs, and many other things. But that meant that natively, ChatGPT could read a vCon. So when you do that, you have the opportunity to get a much more depth to the conversation, to the point where if you're in the messaging space, for example, I don't know, and you have two-way conversations, imagine if you can upsell your customers today or tomorrow with the nuanced information that's been sitting there all along, but from your perspective has been left on the cutting room floor. And that information becomes invaluable because if you're ever worried about losing customers, it's the vCons that made the services very sticky.
Yeah, and let me just go into that for a quick second. So by sticky, let's talk about the conversation itself. It's a recording plus the context of the conversation and who is in it. And the reason it makes things sticky is because it's the only copy of it. It's the only one that exists. So one of the things that we're already seeing with providers who are using vCons is once you've started to use vCons, and by use I mean listen to your customers with them, it becomes very difficult to stop. And so instead of carriers, et cetera, only selling connectivity, they can escalate to selling the deepest information about the conversations you have with customers. And that's really hard to duplicate and very resistant to churn.
And that in turn changes business models, where you go from flat rate pricing to charging something else per conversation. We're able to add true value to those and build relationships up rather than down. And you have the additional insights which you just never had before, which people will pay for, and for a better understanding of those core relationships. So at Stolid, Thomas created not only was Stolid the playground for vCons to be born, and he's accumulated about 10 million or so far, but imagine an application layer which is both horizontal and vertical, where every and any developer in the world can come in now and create value on top of vCons. Now, what Thomas did is he built the first 3 applications, one that does search, one that does the GPT functionality, and a third that does signals. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so the 3 applications sort of correspond to the 3 productivity applications that you have with Windows: Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Anybody who's in business needs those 3 productivity applications. So in like manner, the 3 applications that we did that work on vCons are search, which is basically a Google search. Secondly, it's GPT, which allows you to ask questions about your business using GPT. Here's an example. Which of my customers is going to buy next? Who are my best agents? Please write an email based upon this conversation to everybody who looked at my car last week and tell them that I'd like to sell it to them at a discount. That's GPT. And third is, imagine that you have all these conversations going by, that you have your customer conversations, and with a signal you can say, tell me when someone wants to buy a car. Tell me when someone's angry. Tell me when someone is engaged. Tell me when somebody swears. Tell me when somebody gives me a suggestion to make my business better. Tell me when someone makes a compliment for one of my employees. Those 3 applications allow you to really deeply listen to what your customers are saying at a level you weren't able to before.
And those signals get attached to an in-house messaging system, so whether you're using Slack or whatever type of application you're using to get a hold of your management team, really in real, well, quote, real enough time, you get to take action. So when I looked at what happened in terms of the introduction of the vCon, it moved the telecom industry out beyond telecom, because for the very first time, where we used to take ourselves out when the conversation happened, we're there the entire time. We're there to manage relationships. We're there to provide better, deeper understandings. We're there to do things we never thought we could do before. When it comes to AI, and this is the big trigger, there was a lot of regulatory overhead in terms of managing customer data, compliance, consent. Well, there's another IETF protocol also about to come out in 25 called SCIT, which stands for Supply Chain Integrity, Transparency, and Trust. And that's built on distributed ledger technology, intentionally the first IETF protocol to do so. When you combine SCIT and vCon together with Gen AI, it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And those people who were in this room, I understand, were some of the first to make money from this. But I don't know which people were, but because our memory's foggy from traveling for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly that. So, so one of the things which we didn't understand about vCons and their power comes from the fact that the conversations that businesses have with their customers is like a keyhole into understanding the business itself. So if you were simply to record all the conversations your agents had with your customers over a day, what you would find out is what happened in your business during that day, what the problems were, what the issues were, everything. And it's such a very narrow interface to see so much of the business.
And then imagine you're working in a larger corporation where you have not just a sales department, you have engineering, you have marketing, you have advertising, you have the controller's office, and where, depending up and down the food chain of the management team, everyone gets to be accountable for what's said and what's done. So that, and particularly in highly regulated industries where there's complete transparency, now you have the opportunity exists for all this information to be shared almost in real time. So no longer do companies have to be reactive; they can be proactive based on information which becomes currently available, which is also a game changer in how business is done.
Yeah. Let me give you a real example. Stolid's day job isn't designing network protocols; it's selling cars. And my engineering team kind of overachieved and generated the vCon in the process. And so what we figured as we were using the vCons was it would help us understand the customers better, what they wanted, et cetera, which it did. But the one thing which we really didn't understand was all the dark operational data which ends up in bad customer experience. Here's the example. I got a customer who drove an hour to see a car on my lot that wasn't there. And they were upset because they drove for an hour to see a car that wasn't there. Well, so where does that go in your customer experience stack? Where does that go? Well, I'll tell you where it goes. It should go somewhere because that's a customer experience and it's bad. Being able to understand the actual operations of a business at scale, even for things that aren't written down, are the sorts of things that vCons enable you to see. But at the very same time, it also allows you to protect and be responsible for the data that you hold. So ideas of deepfakes and consent for purpose and withdrawal of consent are all the issues that vCons solve, enabling you to really use that customer data right.
And then for so many people who've been dealing with unified communications, until the advent of the vCon, everyone was talking about unified communications into a company. But reality, what vCons do is come in and unify the communications inside of a company too, and provide a way to bring people together in ways, because it's not just about voice. It's also the email, it's about text, it's about the entire conversational envelope, and that's where the value becomes, because you can bring all those different elements in, and when you look back and do analysis on it, you get the complete picture. I mean, if you just think about, I mean, I have, I don't know, since 2007, 3 million emails from Gmail sitting in my account, 500,000 open.
I have that today.
So if I were to just do a Google search on my email, I only get certain information. But if I were to take the time to vCon my 3 million emails, I promise you that the semantic information I'd get from that is much, much greater. And the door is wide open for anyone and everyone to join in and build applications. I mean, the fact that 3 are out there, that's the first 3 of what will be thousands. And this is not a gated marketplace. This is unbounded. And when you start to look at how transformational this gives you a chance to take a communications company and extend it far and wide, horizontal and vertical at the same time. And that's why I project by 2035, if the telecom industry grows to approximately $3.5 trillion in value, and you're seeing over $100 billion in revenue simply from vCons, which is not a bad market.
Not at all. So one of the interesting things about vCons is where they come from and how they get collected. So we have a very small company. We have 150 people in my company, so it's not a big place. But we have 5 communication systems. We've got a chat system, we've got inbound dialer, outbound dialer, phone system, and email. And our customers could use any one of those conversations to talk to us. So they shouldn't care which one they used. If they emailed us, they would think that we would know what they emailed, right? So every piece of the communications infrastructure, every time there's an interaction with a natural person, in the words of the GDPR, is an opportunity for you to listen to your customers. And so things like mass marketing, things like customized, personalized, one-to-one stuff, and then a deep enterprise insight are all enabled, which is why they're valuable and why you can make a lot of money at it. And by the way, for I know this is a lot of people are doing messaging here, which is totally cool. Just imagine the value that you're leaving on the floor, because right now you're only generating the connectivity. You aren't actually generating the contents of the connectivity, and that ends up being a very valuable thing.
So on the messaging side, you have the opportunity to find all those insights inside the messages. If you happen to know someone who sells SIP trunks, there's an entire opportunity to add AI with that, which will again dramatically, logarithmically drive revenue.
You're only selling one side of a SIP trunk. You sell the number, and you sell the fact that calls go over it, but you don't sell what was inside of it.
Until now.
And that's why you can make a lot of money at it.
And our time's almost up, but thank you for the opportunity. A question? Oh, we have a question?
Take your mic, so you have to share yours. So, Carlos?
Yeah, I have 2 questions, but I'm going to start with the one that maybe really out of the box. Earlier we talked about the perfect use case, so a salesperson of an enterprise that uses Salesforce, and now Salesforce is able to collect these vCons from emails, chats, calls, everything, and automatically fill Salesforce, remind the salesperson that they committed to send a purchase order, right? Remind him that the customer is supposed to send a signed contract on that day, etc. So it's fantastic. But I wonder if you or the regulators or the whole industry that's looking at this thought about the social aspect of it, right? Sales in this case is like a part of where it's formal and informal. So when you spend 30 minutes talking about a contract with a partner, but another 30 minutes talking about how is your children doing and this and that, etc., how would that impact knowing that everything is recorded and made available for the business, because in the business context, but not every conversation is business only, how will that impact the social aspect of it?
vCons also work in personal. Frankly, I work with my sister, and she wishes we were vConning things today so that she can call me out on things which I told her that she never told me things about. I mean, growing up, I always felt I was on the outside of my family, that things happen without being told what went on. And if my parents had vCons, they could prove to me, in fact, that, yeah, actually, you were told. Or, Dad, no, you actually never told me, because here's the vCon, and my sisters are there, but I wasn't. So this is not just for business. This is for everything we do. I mean, you could use vCons together with the skit to preserve legacy for your voice. Imagine if you give your family the right to take your voice phonemes and use it for future generations to read bedtime stories to kids, to your great-grandchildren. You can do things like that. This is multi-purpose.
And getting more to the question. That too. We've had a day. I'm telling you, we have. So I liken it to the practice of medicine, as in 1850 to 2024. So there was a time where medicine wasn't as formal, and you would be able to find a doctor without credentials and a pharmacy without, a pharmacist. But it became a professional job because of the danger it was. And sometimes it's unfortunate to cut someone open, but if they have appendicitis, you have to, right? So there's all kinds of times and places where recordings are mandated. If you're in the financial world, right? There are times and places where conversations are sensitive. What the vCon allows you to do is manage to the situation, and to redact, to manage one side of the conversation, to have the customer to gather the customer's consent and consent for purpose, to record it authoritatively, and have that customer be able to withdraw such consent, and then for the company themselves to prove that they listened to the customer to withdraw it. So I want you to think of the vCon really as a nice little tool set to be able to use for all these use cases. And they're all not appropriate, not all the time, but they do span every time you'd want to do it.
And if any of you were looking for the next big thing to spend time on, I feel I discovered it with the combination of Gen AI plus vCons and Skit. It kind of brings us as a catalyst to some great opportunities.
Yeah, and finally on that, we had our first vCon show 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Crazy amount of interest. We had a full room. We went in there with 2 or 3 companies that had announced products and left with a lot more. This was Bloomberg was on stage, Five9 was on stage, real players who all see this opportunity.
I'd like to thank the MEF for the opportunity to be here, and and thank you for having us, really.
Thank you.
I mean, stopping question. We will continue later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and what a pleasure to have you.